You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello, John. So nice to see you today. How are you doing?
Warm.
You're
as
warm?
At this time of year, that's all we seem to be talking about, the weather at the moment, don't we? When it's cold or it's freezing, make sure you put a hat and scarf on, and when it's hot, make sure you drink. A lot of advice comes from the weather change, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. But I'm really good, actually. Yeah.
You're good?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think the weather is uncommonly gorgeous. I am loving the heat. It reminds me of my home in South Africa, but it's also really interesting to see some of the challenges it's presenting around transportation or wildfires and things like this. So yeah, it's a really interesting time to be experiencing life in the UK at the moment, I think. But super excited to have you here. We always have amazing chats.
Thank you for having me.
So, you are your own radio presenter. So I would love to ask you so many things, but for anyone who's never met you before or listened to you before, can you just tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, I've got a lot of hats, as they say in life. I've had an amazing sort of like upbringing. I've travelled the world. I'm into so many different things, like scuba diving, skied down a mountain dressed as Supergirl one year, which is talking about snow. I know it's probably not the right time in the middle of July, but yeah, I'm quite fortunate enough to have had good parents, good bringing up, one sister, and yeah, the radio stuff has only just recently happened, and I'm saying not just recently, but it was sort of like one of them spur of moments of unplanned events in life that just, when you set out your stall and you want to become something, whether it be a writer or a painter or an artist or the best coach on the planet or a good, genuine person. And I was working at Hebburn Town on the microphone doing stadium announcing last year, and the guy who was doing the music owned a radio station, Nova, and he said, would you like to come on and be a presenter? And I was like, what, like be a presenter on the radio, and I had a podcast, so I know what it's like to interview people. And then all of a sudden I trained up on the equipment, and before you know it, there was me live interviewing guests, talking about different things. And I've had so many vast understanding of the people in the Northeast, from charity work, people who are in the sporting industry. We spoke about subjects like golf, football. We spoke about charity balls. Yeah, it's been pretty a whirlwind since September last year of being a presenter. But I enjoy it, and hopefully I can move on to different realms and different, stations and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
It sounds really exciting that you have taught yourself some skills there that you were never expecting to do, but it was just a case of chasing the opportunity. And yeah. I'm really interested in that. Would you say that in your life you have followed opportunities as they come? Have you experienced a lot of that, where things are like, do you want to try this? And you just go yes? Or have you shifted as you've, gone through life?
It's a good question, actually. And when you look at, I suppose, successful people and try to aspire to become something or somebody in whatever field that you set out to do, I've always been a kind of, thinking about it now, a yes person, as in I like to just think on the spot and go with the spur of the moment. So my biggest character, I would say, is I'm quite a perceiving person. So I see like an intuition and a feeling in my body first before I make a decision. And if that feels right, and when the thinking of the mind gets ahead of the feeling of my body, that's when I normally end up in trouble. So I'm like, oh no, what have I done? Like, I've said yes to this thing, and then the closer that it gets to doing it, I then go into panic mode. But when people say make it up as you go along, I'm a very free kind of spirit kind of guy, is what I found. And evidence of that is when I joined the army. It was like, literally, this is what I'm doing. And before you know it, I was on a train by myself at 17, heading down south, and you just got your bag, and then you rock up and you meet loads of people. But as I moved through my career, I always bounced from place to place. I never sat still for more than 2 years, and I think that was because I grew up as a military kid. So I lived in 7 different countries, went to 9 different schools, met so many different people. So my pattern of life has always been quite a fly by the guy kind of person, you know, and if I stick around too long in a situation, I go crazy, I go nuts. But it's just how I am. And I think, you know, when you look at people that grew up in one town, they've got the same friends and they're still friends 20, 30 years later. I've never had that. I've always just met new people along the way and bounced around. So yeah, it's been fun. But yeah, opportunities, and that's probably why I just say yes to it and see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, so tell me a little bit about life as an army. They say brat sometimes, but life as an army kid, you kind of, as you mentioned, going to different schools, meeting lots of people, moving around different places. Did you find that hard as a kid, or what was your attitude towards that lifestyle?
I don't really think, when you reflect back on it, it probably makes sense in why I can just walk into a room and talk to anybody and be engaging, because of that skill and groundness that you understand at that, you know, at such a young age, and it never leaves you. You know, the imprint of your life, it has never really left me just to be quite a sociable cat. And I think if I hadn't have had that, then I'd probably be a little bit more standoffish with people. And that's just how some people are, and everybody's different in terms of where they're at. Like, I'll literally walk into a bar or a room and I'll know everybody's name in the first 5 minutes, while some people will just stand there and try to take heed of the environment and not feel safe and want to just approach it differently. But yeah, you talk about heat. I went to Cyprus for 2 years as a kid, and we used to go to school at 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, you might know about this, and finish at 12 midday. And that was you. You had just the freedom to go off and swim, go to the beach and do whatever it may be. And that's why I think in foreign countries like Spain, they have their siestas. They've got it right in terms of how they operate and work, and they're more efficient. They're a lot more slowed down. Whilst if you think about the seasons that we get, people don't adjust well. They don't get a hold of it. They go from literally summer to the autumn, and then in winter they're still up at 7 o'clock in the morning and traveling at 1,000 mile an hour, whilst the body should be resting. So understanding that there's different ways of culturally how people operate in different parts of the world, I think for me, that's what I've learned.
Absolutely. I know when I first moved to the UK at 14, you know, I was so into sport or activities, and that was because we had about 5 hours after school. So I was in the swim team, running, you know, dancing. I had so much, sport was so important to me. I found it very strange moving to the UK and then seeing a very different world where the school I went to, unless you paid to be part of a sports group or for extra tuition, you weren't able to engage in certain things. Whereas at school for us, it was essential that you did sport. You had to do two sports actually, or a sport and drama or something like that, or debating or some other activity. And I think that helps develop so many skills, but also physical activity really helps to keep your mind strong, you know, your health great as well. So yeah, I resonate with what you said about going into a room and being able to chat to anyone. I think that for me, if I look back, is also moving, you know, leaving schools and experiencing different places. Moving to the UK, for instance, was very difficult at the time, but it helped to learn to adapt with change. So I'm grateful for that experience. I did want to ask, when you go into a room and you can talk to anyone, right? And you meet all these people. And
if they want to talk back to you.
If they want to. Well, sometimes they don't, do they?
No, and then you just move on. I sense it. You know,
but that's it. So you actually use your sensory skills very well in that sense. And what I want to ask is, it's a two-part question, but how important is it to you to trust your instinct when you're talking to people? Because I imagine as someone, if you're a very feeling person, you can feel whether you want to talk to someone or not, or whether it's safe for you to, because rather than taking on their stuff or their energy. And I think the other question I wanted to ask there is just around just your mental health, and having been in the army and still being a feeling person, how on earth did you cope in the army as a feeler? So if you could share a bit around that, that would be great.
Well, I might go backwards on this question because that's how my brain works. But the way that you are sort of like trained and brought up in the military to become something that is robust enough to withstand pressure, first and foremost, is what that's what they want to get you to as an individual, as a person, to move through different stages of leadership. When you progress through the ranks, it gets more and more difficult, although you look from the ground up and you think, well, they're doing nothing up there, you know, the powers to be. But as you start to grow and develop through that structure, it becomes more and more tough because there's more responsibility. And because I'm such a, I would say now, even more so, quite a what's the word I'm looking for? A more approachable kind of person, and a more like I feel things more than I ever did than I did when I was in the military, because you have to become hardened. So it was difficult, if that was in my personality at the time, to be able to be the soft guy when you've got to be the hard guy. But it depends on who you are and your mentality and where you're at. And when you leave, I suppose you struggle a little bit because you haven't got that support network, you haven't got everybody around you, and you become, the isolation is what the word that people talk about now. Now, when this craziness, I call it a crazy situation and a chapter in life, and everybody calls it the pandemic and whatever it may be, but it's a part of life that's happened. I didn't struggle in that part much. I struggled not seeing people, but the loneliness and the isolation I think I was okay with, because it wasn't really a big test to sit at home and watch Netflix when you've been in situations that were terrible, you know. So it wasn't difficult for me to handle it, and I still went on about my day. And I remember I met this guy, in fact, I'll tell you who it is, Jeff Nicholson. When I first set off my journey, when I left the military as a NLP coach, he told me 3 bits of advice. He went, don't watch the news, surround yourself with good people, and listen to good music. And actually, when you stick to 3 values like that, the things that you can create within your own mind and have room to think about are just, you're not being cluttered with the chaos. And the first question was?
It's all right. I shouldn't have asked you together, but the first one was about protecting your energy, or feeling people out in a networking situation or something like that. As a feeler, how do you protect yourself, or what do you think when you're in that type of space?
First and foremost, is there a bit of eye contact with the person that you want to talk to? Don't just, here I am, which I have done, you know, like in the middle of something, because I can get quite, well, they used to call me like Tigger in the military, because I was quite a jumpy character. I used to just bounce from one place to another, and I couldn't ever sit still. And I think as a kid as well, growing up, I was up and down trees, I was never in the house, I was just, like, I've never really had a game console, you know, like an Xbox or a PlayStation. I've never even bothered with that kind of stuff. I'd rather like pick up a book or listen to a podcast on non-fictional stuff, and inspiration and motivational is what keeps me alive. So when I'm approaching people, first thing you just ask, how are they, you know, and where they're at. But what I've realized is how you are is the kind of people you meet. So if you're in a fun, vibrant, excited mood, the people that you're drawn to will be in that same headspace. If you're feeling low and you've had a bad day and stuff's happened and it hasn't gone right, you know, you haven't got the client you want, you potentially finances are a mess, or you're feeling a little bit lost, you're not eating very well, you haven't been for a walk, you've done no fitness, and your whole energy then is at a state of dullness and low, you will meet people who are like that too. So you'll walk into a room and you'll attract that person, and you'll talk to them and they'll be low. So it's how you are in the world, not by how others are. Who you're attracted to is what I've learned and proven to be right. And if you think about it, it does really work. If you're in a bad place, what we call not a good like vibrational frequency, you're going to meet people who are on that same path. And if you're vibrant and laughing and full of joy and positive, then the people in your world will be the same.
So what I'm hearing you say is that actually you have the power to create your whole day and your whole world by choosing to what you listen to, what you eat, who you surround yourself with, the activities that you do. So it sounds to me that what you're saying there is that you're a very intentional person about what you do. That doesn't mean you're not spontaneous or impulsive, but just around actually, you know, prioritizing your energy and being in a good mental space. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the proof really is in the pudding, which I've just fortunate enough to start a new job with a company who are helping disengaged, not disadvantaged. I'm talking, these kids have lost their path a little bit. They're out the system. They might not have a big group of friends, and they've brought me in to sort of mentor and coach them through life. And in the last couple of months, I've realised that I haven't had to do too much, although I have been tested, because my career in the last 10 years has been working with individuals, firstly in mental health, veterans with PTSD, and then I've gone into more performance-led coaching. And I've never really worked with like younger adults. And one of the kids that I'm working with at the moment was like, John, why are you just so positive about everything? Why do you always say hello to everybody? Why are you always just so nice? And I went, because that is a basic understanding of how you are in the world. If you show up and be that way, you don't have to try to be that way, just be that way. We're human beings, not human doings. I love that saying. Just show up and give people a bit of time and space. It's unbelievable what happens in your day or a week later with a little, what we call the word gratitude. And not gratitude as like, oh, thank you for letting me come on the show today. This is brilliant, and let me do that. Gratitude goes into every cell of your body in terms of who you are. And if you show up in the day and give just one little ounce, there's a Sangharam who's an Indian guru said that if you wake up to the eastern rising sun for 21 days and smile at the sun in the morning, your whole day will be different. So I tried it. I went and tried it. Well, I'm lucky enough to watch it rise. So I says, I'm going to do that for 21 days. And every single one of them days, regardless of what happened, somebody cut me off on the road, somebody banged into me. But I found people were opening doors, saying good morning back. And you're just like, why? It's because you wake up to the sun and smile. And that takes milliseconds, that kind of thing. And I think we're bombarded by gurus about what we should be doing or how we should be feeling. Feel how you want to feel on the day. Do you know what I mean? If you're going to feel bad that day or not with it or don't feel motivated, then be that way. But don't beat yourself up by listening to somebody on a tape saying that you should be a certain way. They're talking about gradually introducing this stuff into your life, not, like having the best body, best diet, doing all of the fitness. It's too heavy. It's too much, I think, in the world to take. Just be yourself.
I think that's a really good point, because we hear about things like toxic positivity, where you can be overly positive and optimistic. And I mean, I see myself as quite a passionate and optimistic person. Yet I do think feelings are valid, and sometimes you just need to feel. And there's a lot of sayings like, you can only heal what you can feel, things like that. So actually sometimes you have to go through feelings and actually sit with them for a little while. At the same time, you mentioned earlier about, if you're having a bad day and you're feeling a bit low, you might attract people like that into your life, or, and I think that's why it's important to, if you are having a rough time or going through a time in your life which is tricky for whatever reason, still looking for opportunities to be grateful, still looking for ways you can give back to others, even if it is something like opening the door or, saying hi or ringing a friend or, helping someone in some way. It's really interesting that what you were saying about, who we can attract into our lives. And I think, again, even things like the music you listen to. I love rock music. I think it's awesome, but there's really upbeat rock music as well as really, depressive rock music, which I happen to love as well. Yeah. But sometimes what we feed our minds is what it focuses on. So I've recently completed NLP master coach training, and I know you've done the same. And what's really interesting is how we talk to ourselves is suggestions to our unconscious mind of how we want our day to go, how we want to feel about ourselves. So actually being intentional, not just about what we do consciously, but also how we speak to ourselves, and our unconscious minds as well.
Yeah. Well, the saying that people are a mirror of you, and that is not in a good or bad way or an indifferent, because one of my favorite topics is the Buddha, which I've been studying for probably about 10 years. The realms, the philosophy, the wisdom, the understanding of all of that meaning that the Buddha brings, like Shambhala, Sacred Path of the Warrior, which you're familiar with, and the Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. These people spent a lifetime being certain ways before they could articulate it to the world. And I think that when you tap into sort of, when somebody's not having a good day, you might not have been having that good day last week, so you know how that feels. So there's compassion. First and foremost, it's like, if I'm feeling great and if I can just give one little tiny little bit of nugget to boost your day, then that's my job done. But also understanding that that's where that person's at. They're just at that point in their life for however long that period lasts, whether that lasts 10 minutes or 2 years, a breakup, grief, whatever that may be. Because everybody experiences, that's what life is, experiencing stuff in life. And they just to know that somebody is having a really bad situation in life, knowing that you've had but that's where they're at in their world. And you can't change it. You can't walk in there and go, oh yeah, let's just like get you out running or get you motivated and stuff. You could just give them one sentence of something that you've heard and be that messenger. And that's what I'm starting to find that I am in life, a messenger. I'm not a guru. I'm just a guy doing his thing, helping people along the way. They either lean forward and be helped or they don't. And they're at where they're at and I'm at where I'm at. And you just do your thing. And if you could just share. That's why my podcast was called Keep Sharing, because it is. It's just, and I got that from my mentor, because he said at the end of every call I had with my mentor, he would just give me one little line to leave me with that just stays. And it was like, just keep sharing. You know, the information doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the world to listen to and feel and have, you know, so.
I like that. And I also like the idea that sometimes people aren't ready to lean in, or maybe that you're not the right person for them. So whether that's doing business together or if you've got a message or something that you want to help them with. However, what I've learned as well is that sometimes just that conversation can shift perspective. So I always think of a time when I was really stressed. I was working in a university and it was super busy all the time. And I'd had a promotion and I really wanted to prove my worth. And because of my own issues with my self-esteem at the time, I wasn't actually, able to say no to projects. So it meant that I had too much to do. And I remember I was managing team members as well. And one of my colleagues, my manager, one day she just said, "Let's go for a walk, Ash." I was like, no, I've got too much to do. And she was like, "Well, you need to take a break." And I was like, "No, I've got too much to do. I can't." And I felt at the time chained to my desk, but that was my model of the world and that was my reality at the time. So what she did is the next time we had a meeting scheduled, since she was my manager, she took me for a walk and we had a one-to-one outside. And just that process of talking to her, not looking at her, but walking next to each other, walking, we look at trauma work, that process of right to left movement, and being able to process things that have happened or things you're stuck with can really help shift things. And I just found it so supportive that she didn't, lecture me. She just did something within her power to shift me along in my journey at the time. And it's always stayed with me. And I'm so grateful to her for that.
The walking that you mentioned is something that I introduce probably around session 2 or 3. Like, let's go for a walk. And I do it with the kids. I literally get them out, because when you're walking, you know that the heart rate increases. Therefore, the blood around the body starts to pump a little bit more. You start to then release all of the stuckness, and what starts to then flow out of your mouth comes from that feeling of movement, which we know how important movement is. That's why in the 2 years that we had, by everybody being stuck and not being able to move in a position where actually to help with the virus was to be moving. It was like a very backwards thinking for my brain to even comprehend, because physically walking along, and that's why I love golf, because you're playing, walking along, sharing an interest with people on the move in beautiful surroundings, and you get more out of people. And that's probably why she's seen you to say, well, let's, and sometimes, like you said, it doesn't have to be eye contact, but because the freedom of movement, you just, all kinds of things come up, and it's you releasing. That the person that's taking you isn't really, they're just listening. You know, they're not trying to find solution or anything like that. It's just offloading whatever it may be. And if you haven't got a good sounding body to do that with, then I think it can, diminish you a little bit.
I think that's a really important shift that I've learned recently. I always used to look at, say, coaches or people as gurus who knew better than someone else or someone to look up to. And that was the way I viewed it. And so when I wanted to invest in coaching courses, I was thinking I wanted to make sure that I had the credibility to work with people. I wanted to make sure that, there's lots of coaches out there that if you're working with people's minds and their hearts and their souls, you want to make sure that you are doing it responsibly and with integrity. But I've shifted from this concept of a coach as a guru on someone like that. To me, it's someone who you trust, who you feel you can connect with to hold a space for you. And your growth and your journey. And I'm really liking that shift for me. I wanted to ask about meditation. So I've been fortunate to observe you at golf days and things.
Quickly on the coaching though.
Yes.
This morning it come to me that I've since becoming this is only since I left the military in 2010, so 12 years, I've just reached about 2,500 hours of coaching, which is an over probably helped and supported and guided and teached, because I'm more of as I started off as a therapist and a coach, I've now moved on to become a more teacher and a guide, which is what potentially in the messenger is where I'm heading now. But yeah, over probably 250 to nearly 300 clients as well in that time. And I was just driving along this morning along the coast road saying, wow, John, this is pretty special, because it's been 12 years since I left the military. So how many people have I worked with before that, and what you've done? And you just think, so an element of each other, and every single one of them, I could probably tell you something that I've learned from them too. So it's never a one-way traffic. And when you learn to become a coach or a mentor or a therapist, I think you knocked it on the head there. It's not like you're not the guru. You just learn the information about what's going on in a psychological way, to be able to hold that space of whatever information, and you never know what you're going to be told. Some things you're not trained for. People are going to tell you stuff that potentially you might not know how to handle. And in that sitting, you have to be brave enough to say, well, based on what you've told me, I feel something like hypnotherapy might work, or to go and, do a little bit of detoxing, or book yourself into, potential go down the medical, whatever it may be. You've got to be honest with yourself as a coach and a therapist to say, right, I've heard that, I've held the space. We can either go there with it, or that is a little bit outside of my territory. And if you're not, and coaching is where you're at now to where you want to be. Therapy is all the stuff that happened before, and as you know, past life regression, hypnotherapy, and all of these other complementary therapies, not alternatives now, they're calling them complementary, that are working alongside GPs and NHS, are becoming so powerful, like Reiki, things like that, releasing chakras, all of that kind of stuff. And I just believe in it's what works for the person. And so just I just think it's a great topic on who we are in that situation.
So to explore that with one point there, I want to ask you about your thoughts on healthcare at the moment. So we have issues where people can't get appointments. They're ringing for 200 calls in a morning to try and get a GP appointment. It can be tricky to be on waiting lists, waiting to be diagnosed for a long time. So actually what you said there about complementary therapies, they can often be quite fast or much faster. So do you have any thoughts on healthcare as it stands at the moment? The
waiting list with the healthcare is collapsing. It is. I know practice managers, I've spoke to GPs, the amount of time they get with a patient, the processes and procedures they have to follow. I've worked with the government organisations. I know that literally something comes from the top that's decided around a table, a strategic plan of how things happen on the coalface isn't necessarily what can be implemented on the strategy that they've created. It's pie in the sky, some of it. And it is so fragmented, the further and further it goes down the line. Like, what it's like, you get an appointment from a GP to go to a hospital, they ring you up, they check on you, then you get a text message, and then you get a letter through the door, and then you get a letter through the door, and then you get a text message to see how it all went. And you're thinking, right, okay, that's a long old a lot of information that's been bombarded for the point of I just need to go for a blood test. And it's like, well, hold on. Or somebody rings up and says, I feel really stressed. Because stress is a feeling, not a thinking, which is what people might think it is. Listening to Chris Evans on Virgin Radio the other day, there was a guy talking about EFT tapping, which he's helped 11 million people through his app. EFT, if you learn how to do it in different parts of the body, releases. It's a Chinese medicine and it's powerful stuff. So somebody on the phone speaking to an expert in the field of somebody that's been working with complementary therapies will reduce the strain on that system probably by 10 to 15%, which is probably going to save £25 million and a headache for the GPs. So I feel the way things are going, they're becoming more receptible to how it is. But a lot of the alternative or complementary therapies are not regulated. So Joe from down the road can go off and train to become whatever therapist that they want to be and call themselves something. So the regulation part of it is what, but now they're starting to find out that acupuncture, meditation, hypnotherapy, other stuff like that, the impact it has in such a short period of time is brilliant. And I think that we're on a bit of a seesawy world. And this stuff, NLP, 70s it was created, it's only becoming recognised now. Hypnotherapy, 2,500 years ago, Egyptian times, only just becoming recognised now. Tapping, Chinese medicines, only just becoming recognised now. The Buddha traditions, kindness, gratitude, philosophy, wisdom, love, joy, peace, the mantras, people sitting there now and doing hand signals and things like that. Being at peace with yourself, going for a walk, keeping away from your phone for a day or two, that kind of thing. There's a lot of impact. The way the health system is now is overrun by things that are being amplified, and those things that are being amplified can be dealt with complementary stuff, as what we mentioned there. So I feel as if they're just not quite caught up with the real world yet.
I like that. So back to meditation and visualization. Mm-hmm. How important is that to you and the people you work with?
If you're quite a visual person, manifestation, visualizing, meditation, I first used meditation with Headspace, the app. So thank you, Headspace, for giving me the opportunity. Took the 10-day trial, 10 minutes a day. And it was at a time when I was suffering, when I just left the military. I'd been diagnosed with PTSD and it was horrendous and I was in a right mess, and I went through the NHS system. I didn't know what to do. Psychiatrist, psychologist, medication, Prozac, every single day. Able-bodied guy, couldn't get out of bed, tremors, nightmares and stuff, and then found Veterans at Ease, the charity, who helped me using NLP techniques, time code intervention, and that's how I sort of got into the release of that. What is this? It's not magic, it's a process, and it doesn't work for everybody. But I then got into some meditation, and as I started practicing it, I was like, okay, I'll sit down for 10 minutes a day and I'll do it. But then I found what I was doing, what people, majority of the people out there that meditate will go 10, 15 minutes or an hour, and then they'll come out of their meditation and then they'll pick up their phone. It'll be a message from the wife, the husband, the father, the kid. They'll look at social media. They'll see something horrendous on there, like a fire or thing. So the head space has gone from being really calm, relaxed breathing to then just back into the rat race and into the world. What I've learned about meditation over time, and in the last 3 years, I've been fortunate enough to work with a guy called Richard Haidt, who is a TEM, Total Embodied Meditation practitioner. And I embarked on his course. He's a 10th Dan Samurai warrior. He worked with the Japanese and stuff, and he's got total oceans of awareness, total embodied meditation. TEM is you being in a meditative state wherever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want. So you do it when you're walking, you do it when you're eating your food. I'm doing it now when we're talking. I am just aware, present, and in this space. Whatever's going on outside in the world is irrelevant. Nothing. It doesn't matter. Time and space. So that's what really I like about the TEM stuff. The sitting down the 10 minutes, the putting a full moon meditation on, or a sleep meditation, or the vibrational frequency of the earth at 0.4 megahertz and getting yourself in tune with that and humming and harring and chanting. It's good, but I just like to, I'm driving along in the car when I'm out walking. You have to practice it though. You have to really
takes discipline.
Huge. Which is, I've got bags off. You know, when I've got my mindset on something, I'll definitely go with it.
Absolutely. I identify with what you said about that being in the moment, because it's a sense, to me, it almost feels transcendentary.
Good word.
You know, being able.
Spell it. Go on.
TR.
No.
But just being able to let the thoughts come, let them stay, sit with them and let them go. So in my own PTSD journey, you know, similarly, I've experienced flashbacks, night terrors, you know, feelings of being completely, you know, reliving certain things. And actually that ability to say, I'm not going to take this on. I'm just going to, you know, the thoughts come up. Okay, I recognize it. You're here, you know, hug my inner child and let it go. You know, being able to sit and just go and meditate wherever you are, whether it's out walking or in nature. It's so powerful, but as you say, it takes discipline. Yeah. Well,
you know the hugging?
Yes.
A guy called Simon Marion, I don't know if you've come across him. He's wrote a lot of PTSD, NLP typey stuff. We had the same trainer, but we didn't know that we had the same trainer until later on in life. And we met through a network marketing company selling health manufacturing products. And Simon's a great guy. And I remember I rang him up one day and I was like, Simon, this is like, it's too overwhelming. I've got like, my daughter's not in a good place. My relationship isn't great. Things aren't going well. And, you know, my head's a little bit of a mess. He went, thought hugs. I went, what? He went, every time you get one of these, just reach in and give that thought a hug. And I was like, brilliant. And it just works, you know, like, you know, you say hugging whatever the part is, it's feeling, yeah, but thought hugs. Thanks, Simon. That's a, you know, it's a good one. And they're the kind of little things that you pick up along the way and the people that you're meeting that stays with you. But the conversation, what I think is that the subconscious mind will only present to you at the time of when you're ready to either deal, accept, reject, or whatever you need to do with it. Because you can't go in there searching for every bit of information that you've learned when you're having 60 to 70,000 thoughts of a day. It's a lot of hugging. 60, you know. So just choose which ones you want to give the hugs and nurture. And it does, like, literally, what can you do, to change whatever's going on for you at that moment is what I say,
I think that's really powerful. I'm conscious of time, so I wanted to ask you one of my favorite questions I ask anyone who comes on this show. So what is your number one word that you would say to nurture your zest? So that's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, the thing that makes you feel you're living your best life. What is the one word?
It's a really on the spot kind of question, that one, because there's many a word go through.
Or a phrase.
I suppose what I normally say to myself is when, like, enjoy change, like embrace change. I think, like allow change to be your friend rather than it being something that you can't control, because it's always going to happen. And just be kind to yourself, I suppose. And that's it really. But the gratitude for me is the big one, though.
Perfect. And,
don't quit. That's what I say to the kids.
Don't quit.
Don't ever quit on me. No, but that's me saying that to them, just to get the best out of them. But well, when I'm just picturing now me waking up in the morning, and at first the majority of the time starts with like a little glimpse out the window, fortunate enough to have a sea view and smile at the world, and just go,
I like that. Smile at the world. Also, don't quit on yourself.
Yeah.
You know.
Don't quit on yourself.
Yeah. Good. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. And I know this was a very spur of the moment and unrehearsed, so I hope it sounded okay. But thanks to you and everybody listening. Yes.
Perfect. And we like impulsivity. Why not? As you said, yes,
unplanned.
People. Thank you. You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.